Yep, audio is coming through.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. My name is Carl Miller. I'm a programming director here at the Federalist Society, and it is our pleasure to welcome everybody today. We're joined by Dr. Willie Soon. Dr. Soon is an astrophysicist and geoscientist at the Solar and Stellar Physics Division of the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. Dr. Soon earned both his bachelor's and master's degrees in science and his PhD in aerospace engineering from the University of Southern California. Dr. Soon is the author of the books The Maunder Minimum and the Variable Sun-Earth Connection with Stephen H. Yaskell, and Introduction to Astronomy with P. N. Kokeke, as well as the author of over 90 refereed papers in scientific journals. Dr. Soon is the recipient of several awards, including the IEEE Nuclear and Plasma Sciences Society's Graduate Scholastic Award, the Smithsonian Institute Award in official recognition of work product, in reflecting a high standard of accomplishment, and the Courage in Defense of Science Award from the George C. Marshall Institute. Dr. Soon's popular writing has appeared in such media as the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Times, and Financial Post. We're also joined today by University of Chicago's very own Dr. Raymond Lodato. Dr. Lodato is a lecturer in the Environmental and Urban Studies and Public Policy Studies programs here at the University of Chicago, where he teaches courses on environmental law, environmental policy, law, and politics, as well as urban sustainability. Dr. Lodato has presented at numerous conferences and given talks on to a wide variety of academic and general audiences on topics ranging from Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si, comparative urban sustainability policy, and money in politics. Dr. Lodato is the principal investigator on the study of non-voters in America, a study of why eligible Americans in swing states choose not to participate in high-profile elections. He has conducted research projects for the NAACP, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Dr. Lodato received both his PhD and his AM from the University of Chicago in political science, and he received his bachelor's in government and peace studies from Manhattan College. Please join us in giving a warm welcome to our guest today.
Thank you all for coming. Indeed, such a pleasure to be able to come here and speak to you. And today, as you can see from my title, I will be speaking on what you call the anti-science agendas and narrative that is created in the US EPA. And I will speak my mind, of course, and I'll come and tell you and show you the evidence, because talk is really, really cheap, but you have to show the evidence, and then especially the scientific part where we will be willing to discuss openly, and then data should be all transparent, yes, for everyone to check. I hope we can agree on that point. And please also listen to what Dr. Lodato has to say later, yes? And EPA, when it started in 1970, clearly it's a very good organization in a sense, because who wants to wake up in the morning and pollute the air and oceans and kill children, who knows what, right? I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous notion, but that seems to be the kind of accusation that I get these days. Just a quick summary, EPA now has grown into some 14,000 or 15,000 sort of size institution. The budget is about $9.6 billion. I would say that if I may propose one notion is that, yeah, maybe we can keep EPA for a short time, but I would say that let's reduce the size of employee down to like maybe a factor of 10. So. And since there are some protests, right, about Willie being so corrupted and all that, so I apologize, I'm not that corrupted, by the way. If anybody wants to, please look up. I did, by the way, I waited for 7 years. I mean, I was attacked in front of New York Times, 2015, front page of New York Times. And then I waited about 7 years. I got this opportunity to speak at Hillsdale College in April. So watch the talk there. So there's a lot of details there, okay, please? And then we will start with the topic of climate change, right? And then I will give example on Mercury too, and then talk about air quality business. And what better place to be here to speak about, after 40 years of thinking about this, 30 to 40 years, here's what I can summarize for you in terms of weather and climate system. By the way, you can ask any professional climatologist or meteorologist or other, Ask them the simple question, what's the difference between weather and climate? No one has any right physical definition of this. They always say, oh, climate, World Meteorological Organization says it's about 30-year average of this thing. But why 30 years? No one can answer that, because it can be as long as 100,000, who knows what, right? It's that kind of imprecision that makes a lot of confusion in terms of the actual physical sciences. Ask all the University of Chicago's professor in climate physics, right? So, the Earth system is powered by the sun. Please remember, numbers are important in science, right? Here is on the order of 10 to the 26 watt. The Earth emits very tiny amount of energy, by the way. So it's completely powered by all the motions and air and all the organisms, the bio, including us, is all powered by the sun essentially, right? And then notice that we can actually make very powerful laser this day, by the way. There's 100 petawatt, which is 10 to the 17 petawatt is being made, but it's only in pulses. This is continuous energy, so big difference, right? But the point is that you know that in terms of climate change, people want to demonize this molecule called CO2. You can actually put on the same scale. CO2 is not energy of anything. It's 10 to the minus 22 watt. You want to know about the orders of numbers, right? The reason why I want to put out CO2 is that because I'm very proud to be speaking here at the Federal Society of University of Chicago, where your first advisor probably is Professor Anthony Scalia, the late Anthony Scalia, yes? He has had a very good saying on terms of CO2. I hope any of you heard of the Massachusetts versus EPA decision on April 2nd of 2027. I mean, like almost of April Fool jokes, really. Essentially, the policies and all this work need to make sure that you can classify CO2 as an air pollutant, then you can regulate under Clean Air Act, right? That's basically the mechanism they needed. But I'm humbly apologize. You know, human law can never change biological law and physical and chemistry law because CO2 can never, ever, ever be an air pollutant. So Scalia actually, in the dissenting opinion, says, if you want to consider and classify CO2 as an air pollutant, frisbee and flatulence would qualify as well, isn't it, right? As an air pollutant, in that sense. You know, the frisbee gonna knock on somebody's head, right? Oh, you guys have a lot of law students would be happy with that. Make some money. Here's the actual number. This is the actual energy in terms of classification. The sun is ultimately the controller of everything. So, if you add what the CO2 is doing over 150 years, that's how much we have added. Okay? And that's how tiny amount, and then they keep want to narrow you on the CO2 part, and then they never want to talk about this big gorilla in the room, really. And then it turns out that from solar physics, we have learned also at least from last 40 years or so, that the sun also changes, also vary. It's not a constant knockout. That's the notion that actually been very misleading for a very long time, and then of course, I'll show some example of that too. And then, isn't it a big surprise? I don't know how many of you have heard of this chart. That in terms of the US carbon dioxide emission, quantified in this way, we have been decreasing for the last, since 2005 or so, right? So it's about 17 years, yes? It's down by about 18%. So if this CO2 were to be doing something so dramatic, you know, controlling the the US temperature, you can look at it. I'm sorry, I should say 99.999. I shouldn't say 100%. Too many digits, right? So about 100%. It's impossible, in the sense. This is what the data look like. Okay? And how come? By the way, really, I ask again, how many of you have seen graph like this? They never usually show you this because yeah, they say it's too complicated. You know, a lot of arm waving. They don't show you what it is. But that's the range of temperature. So it's not going to be able to find the CO2 so easily. So if you want to look at it for the last 20 years, the most updated data is still showing that all season cycle. And then in between that, there's some tiny modulation, yes. And then we will explain some of that could be the sun actually, rather than the CO2. Okay? And if you subtract the season out, this is the most accurate temperature data that we have from NOAA. Okay? From 2005 or so. So roughly coincide with the period where you drop the thing by 80%. I'm sorry, you know, 18% is pretty large changes. How come we see nothing? Yeah? I think that's a question that in which if you want to make a rule, you better be precise about what you're talking about, right? And then, so yeah, indeed, where is it? Where is the drop in temperature? And then finally, I want to get a bit about, you know, the sun's factor in terms of climate change. one of the famous things that I am is famous is basically I got a lot of Wikipedia entry which I don't even need to be on. But somehow they want to put me on, and then they say that there's such a climate scientist named Gavin Schmidt who has already rebunked and refuted all my arguments, quote unquote. Well, this is what Gavin Schmidt is. By the way, he's the director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Study. Hello, Gavin. But he actually said that my work, my scientific work is nonsense. It should be some poop emoji. By the way, I'm doing the work that he's supposed to do. Okay, I'll show you the data. And then he tells people, don't look at my paper. This is the paper that I wrote last year with a bunch of colleagues, okay? By now, it's downloaded to almost 28,000 more, right? People downloaded this review article, addressing a very simple question. How much does the sun affect temperature data, right? And this work is very comprehensive because it's very, very thick. We've got 530 references involving 23 co-authors and 14 countries. These are all experts in their individual areas, and then we collect all of them. Let's try to put out the best scientific review that we can have, right? And then, of course, Wikipedia also say that, oh, Willie Soon is just trying to mess around. He just, got paid by fossil fuel, so he say what he say because of fossil fuel industry, so on and so forth. And, he doesn't know science. But I want to show you some of the science that we put out, right? They say that I contend that global warming is caused by solar radiation rather than human activity. I don't make those claims. I show you the claim. Okay, I'll show you in a minute. Well, finally, right? Wikipedia got that one right. So here's the thing I want you to stare at. Spend a few minutes. On your left there is the thermometer station, Northern Hemisphere land, all the thermometers, right? This is called the station that we combine by using all the rural and land stations. Okay? You plot the curve, yeah, it looks like, it's warming about a degree of century per century. And then the other side, it's a very unique study in the sense that somehow no one wants to ask this simple question. If we think that the urban stations are contaminated by all sorts of factors that have nothing to do with CO2, why don't we take and look at what the rural stations do? You already immediately see the character of this change is very different, right? You have up and down now, instead of just strict warming that feed the carbon dioxide narrative, isn't it? So let's take a look. This is by the way, this is the graph that we published in the paper, right? The review paper. Oh, no doubt there's a scientific consensus. That's what NASA say. Gavin Schmidt, thank you for producing the results. That's what they say. But in science, what do? We just check them. In our paper, we can easily produce every result that they produce. So I show all the graphs from IPCC, the Climatic Research Unit in England, the Hadley Center, the NOAA, NASA, GIS, Berkeley Earth, and then this one is Canadian, I think, Meteor Agency or something. Yeah, we show all of that. We can show the same result on the condition that you take apple and orange, bang! You call it banana, right? I'm not going to go with that, right? So this is why I don't believe in them. So if you study the factors of what's causing it, you can actually model it quite well. You explain. It makes sense. Okay, I'll say that, the South America, his classmate Baba, kind of see the thing from in Africa, it kind of match. So no need continental theory, right? No need proof. But it fit. And then sun, the solar natural is so small, and explain why they show it that way, and then human cost factor is doing that. Fine. So we just show you. By the way, this is the most important essence in science. You show both sides, and then explain it, right? So now let's look at what the natural part. This is my point of view in the sense that we found this result, okay? And then when the sun part and the volcano part, see, it's slightly different now, because IPCC is trying to hide the information, de-emphasize that there's such a result. It's equally valid. No one can reject this. That's the whole point. That's why we published the review. And then the human part is small in that sense. So mostly I explained by the sun effects. This is why the sun is smiling, right? Well, here's the bottom line, right? You cannot reject this hypothesis. It's there. This is the one that I actually give IPCC because in 2021, in August, they published their working group 1 report, physical report, where they didn't cite this paper. So reporter go ask them, why don't you cite this paper? Oh, they say they were too late. They didn't make the deadline. I understand some rules, but you please don't tell people. IPCC claim proud to tell them that we are the most comprehensive. Everyone in the world except Willie Soon, of course, agree with them, and then publish the latest scientific evidence. How is that scientific, right? They say that we are too late because of the cutoff rules. Okay? But that doesn't make any sense because it's not the most updated science. We had this, we've been working on this paper for 2 years. You could easily contact me. I'll be so happy to share with IPCC what we found. Okay? And then you make whatever decision you want, by the way. So let's ask what IPCC is saying. In the sense, when I say IPCC, there's a parallel in US EPA point of view. Okay? What is IPCC is about? Their objective is to provide government at all levels with scientific information that they can use to develop climate policies. So you can see, it's all for international negotiation. It's clearly not to advance any scientific understanding of climate change. Yes, that they claim that I dispute in Wikipedia. So let's highlight the IPCC approach and my approach, or in fact all my colleagues in science that actually agrees with me in some sense. The main goal for them is international negotiation to reduce greenhouse emission. Notice that US, we already reduced by 18%, we see nothing. I don't know why, if you have a little headache that you have to chop off your arms, your legs and everything, and then you're bleeding, they won't even give you something to cover it up, and then they say, yeah, it will work, you'll be fine if you just do that. Anyway, my goal is to understand scientific understanding, to improve science. That's all. I enjoy science. And then their goal is to help UNEP, United Environmental Program. Mine is to help scientific community investigating the challenging and fascinating subject of climate change. And then they obviously require uniform scientific consensus. Otherwise, it will create this so-called climate action hesitancy, they call it, right? The merchant of doubt. Clearly, who cares about doubt, right? Science is about evidence, isn't it? Require open-minded scientific inquiry from my point of view, or else we'll be succumb to confirmation bias. That's all I care about. And then finally, when you have disagreement, guess what IPCC do? Downplay, ignore. If you look at my talk, I explain actually example of some of my work being presented at the IPCC report where they misquoted us actually, right? They try to say that we agree with them. Absolutely not, right? That kind of thing. And then that kind of bully is just, a bit silly. Hit and run. You understand what hit and run is? The concept is that I slap you and then I hide away over here. I don't know who did that. That is just not right. Okay? So I don't agree with that. I want it to be publicly known. So, what about the US Global Change Climate Research Program? This is our own version of IPCC. Look at what their stated objective, right? To ensure that results are useful in developing national and international policy response to climate change. I mean, clearly that, I'm sorry, please don't say that science support you. Okay, we've been trying very hard to provide input to this whole thing, but every single time they would ignore you. Okay, this is why I think that in terms of the issue of climate change and CO2 regulation, something, especially the Supreme Court decision, has to be somehow redo. Now let me move on to mercury emission from US power plant. Okay, mercury are everywhere. That's a storyline for you. I want to start with this happy angler, President Eisenhower and his 4 brothers. They were fishing for muskie and northern pike, somewhere not too far from here, yes? In 1946, very happy people. But the reason why I show this picture is that, yes, there's some mercury inside the pike, the northern pike. But if you were to go and measure it today, it's more or less the same. That's what I want to tell you, okay? And President Eisenhower has some great insight during his farewell address that I like very, very much. He's talking about really how the government funding is actually corrupting science. And we are creating this, what you call the industrial and military elites in some sense, right? The clear thing that he was saying that I like very much is that a government contract become virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. The prospect of domination of nation scholar by federal employment, project allocation, and the power of money is ever present and is greatly to be regarded. We must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific technological elite. I really think that what EPA is doing now fits into this paradigm very, very well. And I want to give you an example. Like I told you, data. Sorry, this is data. This is about something that I found in Florida. By the way, this is none of my business. It's just that they are starting to make all this noise and I start looking what's going on, right? That's all I care about. But at that time, by the way, my wife was pregnant with my kid, so I want to figure out, does the woman eat this fish and then make the kid IQ lower and become crazy, or I don't know what. So I need to check it out. So for my own selfish reason, I look at this data. Look at that. This is plotting the fish mercury level, okay? And then you're plotting the total amount of mercury in the water column. I don't know, guys. You see any relationship? Nothing, okay? Let me not scare you, but just for fun, to tell you that if you guys eat a lot of tuna, they keep saying that eating tuna makes your kids crazy also, right? You look at it, the data from just came out, 18 years. This paper that just got published from a group in France, showing you the big eye tuna, yellowfin. I didn't know the slight difference. The guy is a big eye tuna, but anyway, skipjack. It's more or less up and down and up. A lot of these fluctuations are related to meteorological factors and things like that, right? It has nothing to do with the total amount of mercury in the system, or even the mercury that come out from the power plant and go down into the ocean, so on and so forth. Because it just doesn't work that way. There's huge amount of mercury already in the ocean, on the order of 500,000 tons at least. And in terms of number, let's watch it. Okay, quick. What do these 17 products have in common? I think some of you, we all think this, right? I could certainly take some of those. Scary is actually mercury. Here's a lesson one. Lesson number one. We are in a state of what you call technological scientific precision. We can measure things down into not parts per million, parts per billion. We're doing parts per trillion, 10 to the 12. Okay? Some of it require a lot of technological methods. You know, the chemical labs, you do a lot of work. For us scientists, we like to think of a problem like this. We can do those things. But so what? The question, right? Look, the total mercury that you detect in all of these are so-called inorganic mercury. They are not this biological toxic form called metal mercury. That's the one key thing. Plus that the process going from inorganic to the metal mercury have a huge big processes that have no change or connection back to this particular amount that you have. That's why you couldn't see this total mercury in the water versus the fish lake. You know, the fish in the lakes and the water to be related at all. And then the amount of this is really very, very small. I can give you an example, 10,000 times less than even the amount of fish or tuna that we eat, right? So very quickly. Then I found out that Florida State went crazy. This is the time that I actually ended up writing about 3 op-eds also for Florida paper. Of course, that's not the Wall Street Journal thing. It's actually, they try to set this is using Clean Water Act, another law, right? They want to limit the mercury amount at 1.2 parts per trillion, nanogram per liter. That is 50 times more than Coca-Cola. Sorry to tell you. That's the data for Coca-Cola. By the way, these are all the activist groups who publish this sort of stuff. They spend enormous amount of budget to go and measure these things. It's 62 parts per trillion. And then, look, we want to regulate the water in Florida to be 1.50 times smaller. It's nonsensical. Got to take a step back, right? You're doing something that is, I don't even understand where is the logic of what it is. Oh, you have to know why is this thing not poison, right? Because all poison depends on the dosage. The famous saying by Paracelsus, right? All things are poison. Nothing is without poison. Only the dose permits something not to be poisonous. That's a lesson that you got to take home with. And then now let's quickly look at the budget, the component that supply the mercury into the air. Ocean has about 2,000. Volcano is the example that I want to tell you. The science is so premature, but IPCC magically always cite the lower one because as high as 4,000, okay? And US power plant is only 45 tons every year. And that main source is actually from mercury, from coal, from burning coal. And then you can see the man-made total of US is about 100. And then the rest of the non-US is about 2,000. Guess who is the number one guy there that produces this? It's China, basically. This is the China coal use, and US, we've been going down in that sense. Why are we trying to control this 40 tons? Actually, if it's a dangerous thing, yes, we should do it. But we should not be doing it because it absolutely has no link, and you can't change any outcome in that sense. And here's an example of US EPA administrator before. Even during the Bush administration, I think this is one of those, Mike Leavitt, who say that they always emphasize the small one, but the number can be 7 times more or even more, 4,000, like I said. But they always pick that thing. That kind of bias, I think we should openly transparent. And they always give one number and never show you the rest of it. As a scientist, I wouldn't let that hold, obviously. So I have to tell people, in fact, inform them. And then these are components from soil that previously deposited vegetation and forest. Look at the amount. We're talking about amount of huge, beyond 45 tons. This is from state of Nevada itself. Just a natural substrate in Nevada, 10 tons, right? And then the worst thing is, in EPA decision making is basically secret data. This data actually funded by NIH partly, and then European Union put some data. When I work on this problem, we were trying to get the data from them, from Danish group. They refused to release the data. But this is by the way, this is the number one, numero uno, the evidence to say that when the mother gets pregnant, eat the tuna, eat some fish or something. But the worst problem for this case, I'll tell you the problem later. You eat those things and then your kid come out, your IQ get lower. So you do this Boston IQ test, Boston naming test. This is the score. Positive mean good. Worse is that way, right? And then the data of exposure of the mercury. Okay, look at what the data. This is the worst statistics that you could possibly play. I could easily make the graph go anyway if I were to use different techniques. This is what they're trying to say. This is what you're doing. Not only that, you know what they did? They actually put the line. The actual response is right around there, and then they try to make you like the data are curving downward using their eye. And then they say you have to have another conservative factor of 10. At 58, they go down to 5.8. This is what they mean by saying that we got to reduce the mercury so much that we're so insensible, by the way, to 5.8 parts per billion for the cord blood. And then in science, by the way, that data was secret. Then another group, from my friend Gary Meyer at University of Rochester, they've been studying this children that eat fish. The mother eat fish and all that in Seychelles Island. Look at the same test they do. Not replicable. They don't see no effect. And no one even really want to talk about this. I don't know why. To me, it's a very outrageous thing, actually. And then, just to tell you that how crazy EPA's what you call reference dose, RFD. They set it as 5.8 parts per million for blood mercury, the cord blood, and then for hair concentrated a lot more, 1,000 times more, 1 ppm. But if you look at the CDC thinking, there's a particular survey that we do, the National Health Survey, that they set the limit if it's only 15 or 200. So somehow EPA go way beyond any level of danger. Do you understand the difference between the inconsistency between different agencies? CDC say that it should be about 200, not 5.8. God, that's just too much, right? It's just to the point where it's impossible. This is what I'm trying to talk about this because there's a class of thinking now because of all this precision that we can measure. They're trying to do down to zero mercury. Do you understand? It's ridiculous. That's why I point to you that Coca-Cola, those are all from manufacturing process. Some of the stuff will have some mercury around. That's why the amount is trace amount. Okay, I wouldn't say that, yeah, good, I like a lot more mercury, yeah, I'll be better. No, it's just unavoidable. I'm sorry. It's going to cost $1 billion to make a popcorn. I don't know, it's just going to be too much. Who can afford that? And then just another way to think about how extreme the EPA's reference dose. Okay? By the way, these are all codified, modified, whatever in law. I don't know about law, by the way. I don't even pretend to play a lawyer in TV, right? But that's what they're doing. In Japan, if you survey the people that eat the regular fish, if you use the EPA level, it will be 87% of them have mercury level exceeding the safe level. So you got to say all the Japanese are crazy. They might be offended, okay? It's not possible. It's just nonsense, these people. And now let me move on quickly to air quality, the last aspect of this thing. Clearly that air quality is an important issue. You know, in Los Angeles, you all know about this small problem, right? Because of inversion layer, it's all this weather phenomena. Now, places like India and China are going crazy. This is India, under the famous monument in Delhi. Look at the clear sky. It's not there all the time. Just always remember that this is weather phenomenon in some sense. Okay? And then if you look at the data, you got to start thinking about number here. Here, we are measuring things in terms of how much of the material, PM 2.5, which is, but I'll show you what it is, of course, the size of particulate matters, or 2.5 micron or smaller. But here, they are measuring at the level of 100, 300, 600, right? I'll tell you what the US one is for the punchline later. It's actually about 10 to 30, no more than that, right? And then that's why I say US air is too clean now, it's clean. That's why how clean should it be is the question that you should ask EPA. Not keep endlessly regulating. Keep want to lower the standard where it doesn't make sense anymore, actually. And then look at Delhi on a bad day. Yeah, it's true. But that's Delhi problem, really. They need to solve this problem, but this is a problem of poverty. They have nothing to do with people interested in killing themselves by polluting, isn't it? Iran, Santiago, Chile, Lagos, Nigeria, Egypt. Egypt just had the COP conference, so you can see those guys were breathing the bad air. But anyway, in Beijing, you can see it can reach 755 too. But look at Beijing, right? It's clouded. And then because very hard to get data from China, by the way. So U.S. Embassy is smart. And that one I praise them for putting up the monitor and measure the level. See, it's about 100 to that, right? U.S., like I said, U.S. is on average, it's only 10 or less, right? On a daily basis, some can go up to 35. That's the EPA's rule. Then up to 35 or 40. Here's another example how the weather affects. Now let me quickly say, the summary is that the mega city of the world is actually facing this so-called small problem, not PM or ground ozone problem. Ground ozone is another very serious thing that if I have time, I'll tell you more. But what did EPA say about PM 2.5? Any inhalation of PM 2.5, by the way, these are statements from Lisa Jackson, the administrator. Oh, structurally, I think EPA has a problem because they give sole authority to the administrator. He can actually say, I don't care to look at Mercury data, I can make a decision. In that sense, that's really a problem. So the Congress needs to change something. So death from this can occur within hours. This is called sudden death, or over years or decades. So these are called premature death. And then look at how important this is. She qualified that if we can reduce particulate matter to the healthy level, the question is, what is the healthy level, right? It would have the same impact as finding a cure for cancer in our country. This is a very strong statement. This is what it is. What is 2.5? You can see it's so small. Human hair is 250 to 70 microns. This we're talking about a factor of another 20 or 30, right? Smaller, right? And this is what EPA says. They claim that PM 2.5 killed 570,000 Americans per year. You all know what it means, right? When you make statements like that, you really need to find the body. Where is it? You really need to, these are all hypothetical, by the way, it's numerology. And that's what I'm scared about EPA when they make things like this. Here's the comparison. In that sense, we are breathing clean air. Because I told you our level is not like Beijing and Delhi and all these other places. We are on the level of 10. Those guys are 100, 300, 600 sometimes. 570 blue sky. And then you know how many people killed for smoking? Remember, these smokers are also breathing the same air as well. How is that possible, right? This is a statistic that's impossible, and please, I'm sorry, EPA, you got to step back, and this is wrong. So, give you an example, in a smoking launch like this, I mean, you're bringing in 10,000. Like I told you, the EPA standard to be dangerous is about 35, okay? That is on the daily high. But on average, annually, it's about 10, okay? And then look at the kind of thing in Shanghai, right? 600. But they have life expectancy of 82.5, much longer than actually US in the sun. So quickly I want to show you the data. You can use satellite observation to do this, and this is what you measure. By the way, there are also dust involved, right? This is the part that includes everything. So dust, you can see Sahara Desert, all the dust area, you got very high concentration of these small particles. But if you reduce that, you can see the main area is still, in the sense, India and China, in that sense. US is all blue, light blue, right? We are pretty much in good quality of our air. This is the data over time. This station is in Detroit, right? From 1998 to 2013 or so, right? Satellite reduced data is showing downward trend and things like that. And then other places of course keep going up. Then if you watch the level, look, we're from 0 to about 30. Those guys are keep going up at much higher scale, right? 200, 100, right? That's very big. This is the stuff that I want to say. You know what EPA is doing? EPA is conducting this sort of human experimentation that I think no one of you, have you guys ever heard of this particular situation? They actually did this. This is an actual laboratory in North Carolina. They do a human testing. First of all, remember, they tell you that CO2 can kill you instantly if you breathe certain amount. And then they are doing testing. And you know who they recruit to do? They recruit young children and adults over 50 to 75 and all that. This is the actual gas chamber. My friend Steve Malloy is the one that did all this work. And I'll show you his paper soon. By the way, they also force it on animals. This is the mouse, right? People who don't like animal abuse, you see this, you don't like it that much. They really force air into the rats, okay? But the most amazing thing is that indeed they reported that no animal ever died in those experiments. So, here's a logical problem for logic. Only logic, no need science. Throw away. If PM 2.5 is as lethal as EPA say, right? It does commit a crime, right? It's a bit like this Tuskegee experiment that we know. It's all the wrong. They violated every law and principle, right? Called human testing since the Nuremberg Code. If they are not committed crime, they didn't do that, then they have lied to the Congress, right? And the public about the danger of PM 2.5. There's just no way out of this. So EPA really been hiding a lot about this. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to tell you things for the first time. This is the truth. EPA, if they disagree, come and show us why we are wrong here. Isn't it? Oh no, we don't have to, you're just a corrupted. That's the way they fight. No, by evidence. We just show you all your picture. This is a very worthy book to read, by the way, by my friend Steve Malloy. Anyway, how clean is clean? Look at that. Every econometric measure, GDP, right? Vehicle travel, population, all keep going up. The pollution, air pollution of US aggregate is keep going down. Here's the detail. For the PM 2.5, we've been going down quite a bit, right? 30% or so, right? Over the last, you can see 30 years or so. We've been going down. We've been getting cleaner and cleaner, okay? Just by the wealth that we have. And then a very quick thing about what EPA is doing. By the way, the PM 2.5 standard, it was set in 1997 at 15 microgram per cubic meter. And then 2012, 5 years later, they did lower it to 12. Look at that, going down from 15 to 12. What does it mean? It just costs more regulation, so a lot of industry had to deal with it, but it's just a lot of extra cost for nothing, really, in that sense. That's my humble opinion. By the way, I don't really care about industry either. I care it's about science. I'm trying to ask the question, what does this get you? Nothing, really. But yet they keep doing it. Not only that, the point I want to tell you is that in 2022, obviously they want to lower even further. It's the idea that it has to be zero, in that sense. It's all totally ridiculous, right? So, quickly, why is it that there's no harm of PM 2.5 on premature death? It's all these factors. It's a no etiological mechanism. You can ask all the medical sciences you want. Weak epidemiological risk. By the way, the risk ratio is always around 1, which means that didn't find no signal, by the way. If you can find factor of 2, like risk ratio of 2, that is good. Okay, gold standard, good. They can never show anything 2, always about 1, 1.05, 1. Whatever the digit, they keep stretching. And then uncontrolled confounding. By the way, the most important thing is basically work from my friend Jim Armstrong at UCLA. That he actually tried to replicate the stuff that EPA claimed that they found problem for PM 2.5. You cannot validate them. And then the data, when you ask for it, again, another example, they won't release it. It's just always so ridiculous. Congress has worked so hard. Lamar Smith from Texas has challenged Gina McCarthy, EPA administrator. Why don't you release the data? No, they say it's naming. No, delete the name. We don't need to know whose name. We just want to know the data. Their age and their health condition, and then did they die from those things? And here's a very important work from my friend Stan Young. He's a prime statistician. He actually looked at the air quality and acute death in California. So they finally found a set of data covering about 12, 13 years or so. This is an actual test. If there's a problem, look at the data. This is basically trying to see if we can have effects or not. And then the air pollution variable, PM 2.5, keep increasing. They found nothing, really. So this is a very, very powerful work with a lot of sampling power between a lot of good data. And they actually found that, according to a question between this association, this is what sometimes you do in science. You get lucky, you find some good sets of data where you can answer the question. Sometimes you have no answer. When you don't know, you got to say you don't know, by the way, right? If you know now, we actually tested this. They tested this. So in that sense, the cases for EPA is much, much weaker now, even for regulating PM 2.5 to death in some sense, right? They're going to eventually kill all of us. So my conclusion is very simple. It is time to face a hard truth. This 70 years to federalize the sciences has been a failure, right? The task now is to prevent big science cartel from further dehumanizing society and delegitimizing science. Really, trust the science, but the scientism is not science. Follow the science, always the narrative. It's not the science at all. This is the second hard truth. The necessary reform will come not from within. So this one, he says that it should not be from scientists, rather from people and their representatives who have to impose them to restore science to its rightful place and valuable place. Break up science cartel. 2 more minutes to promote my own work. So what should we do to get science on the track? We should be encouraging scientific inquiry, not scientific consensus. Both IPCC and US Global Change Research have ended up as a major contributor to the problem rather than a solution. So it's very sad, all this big thing, but I have to say, we need a proper discussion how science should be funded, because in England, there is a very famous journalist who say that if you want to get your research funded, when you study the squirrel, the nut gathering behavior, you have to say it's related to global warming, then you get funding. If you don't get funding. That's what it is. This is a serious problem. Then we can, nowadays, another tools that they invoke in Facebook, Twitter, all this thing is about the fact checker. They are not fact checker, they are narrative checker. Nonsense. And then finally, you get all this kind of problem. Big tech, they're really doing a lot of this censorship is coming. And then I myself started this Center for Environmental Research and Earth Science under the Goddesses of Agriculture series. So we've been doing a lot of work like this. So for the last few years, we've been producing a lot of work, and our work been cited by IPCC and all that. And again, this is now a work that I try to tell you that is very hard, but we completely want to be independent from anybody. So we don't want any funding from any of these major people. Anybody can donate $5, $10. I'm happy to receive it because I buy printer, I buy all these papers, do the work, basically, right? And then one last thing. We set our own agenda, right? You don't let people tell you anything. We follow the science instead of following the money. So Greenpeace, did you hear that? We emphasize real-world observation and data because you cannot keep playing this hypothetical death stuff. It's all numerical modeling. I know how to do that, by the way. I really know how to do those things. That's why it's so boring in that sense. You can go to sleep when you look at those things. These are not real data. Please, stop it. So we still met our results. So we always, like I show you the IPCC stuff, we show you how they produce the data, right? If you take rural and urban station, you combine that, obviously you get that curve. Big deal. But why don't you tell people about the rural station only, right? So that's the kind of stuff. And then we welcome donation. Okay, that's it. Finally, that's it. All right, I need to drink some wine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now move on to the commentary portion of the event. Dr. Lodato. You can come up right here.
Very attractive wine. From Hungary. I got an affiliation with Hungary now, so you can see why I go there.
Well, Anson said he wanted me to talk about EPA. So I'm not going to talk about the science, I'm not going to come up with my own set of figures, I'm going to talk about EPA. EPA was founded in 1970 by President Richard Nixon under the Executive Reorganization Act. Congress had nothing to do with it. Nixon proposed it, Congress decided could veto it, and decided not to do that. Okay, so score one for the unindicted co-conspirator. EPA derives its authority from Congress. Okay, it's allowed to regulate air pollution and harmful pollutants, including mercury, because Congress mandated that it be allowed to do so. The complaint isn't with EPA overstepping, really, but with Congress's delegation of authority. If Congress feels that EPA has overstepped its authority to regulate, it has tools as its disposal. It can cut funding for activities it doesn't like. It can conduct oversight hearings and pressure the agency to move in another direction. It can overturn a regulation that it doesn't like. So it has tools in its place. EPA's regulations on mercury and other air pollutants are based on scientific studies, on external studies. Mercury can damage the nervous system, the liver, kidneys, and the immune system. Mercury vapors pass from the lungs to the blood. In 2022, the Biden administration, through the EPA, sought to restore the mercury and air toxics standards rule, okay? MATS it's called. The Trump EPA had ruled in 2020 that it was not necessary and appropriate to regulate mercury under the Clean Air Act. The MATS rule, which was enacted in 2015, was estimated by the EPA to have prevented 11,000 premature deaths, 4,700 heart attacks, and 130,000 asthma attacks beginning in 2016. EPA's authority to regulate air pollutants comes from Section 112 of the Clean Air Act of 1990. It addresses, quote, emissions of hazardous air pollutants. Prior to 1990, the Clean Air Act established a risk-based program under which only a few standards were developed. The 1990 Clean Air Act revised Section 112 to first require issuance of technology-based standards for major sources and certain area sources. Those are the two different types of sources as well. For major sources, Section 112 requires that EPA establish emission standards that require the maximum degree of reduction in emissions of hazardous air pollutants. This is what Professor Stu was talking about. EPA's authority then to regulate pollutants is essentially a syllogism. Okay? Under Section 112 of the Clean Air Act, EPA has the authority to regulate major sources and certain air sources of air pollution. Mercury is a major source given the definition in the Clean Air Act. Therefore, the EPA has the authority to regulate. Okay? The World Health Organization notes that while mercury can occur naturally, human activity is the main cause of mercury releases, particularly coal-fired power plants, residential coal burning for heat and cooking, industrial processes, waste incinerators, and as a result of mining for mercury, gold, and other materials. Also, we have to look at the impact that mercury and other air pollutants have, which is not the same for everybody. Okay, this is an idea that was popular at the beginning of the environmental movement, the idea that if we solve some forms of pollution, everybody would benefit from it. But we found in recent years, in recent decades actually, that really pollution is not evenly distributed. Pollution is differentially distributed. The EPA under President Biden, but also under Presidents Clinton and Obama, was given a mandate to focus its attention on areas where pollution differentially and negatively impacts minority and low-income communities. Okay. President Biden's executive order on environmental justice states agencies shall make achieving environmental justice part of their missions by developing programs, policies, and activities to address the disproportionately high and adverse human health, environmental, climate-related, and other cumulative impacts on disadvantaged communities, as well as the accompanying economic challenges of such impacts. It is therefore the policy of my administration to secure environmental justice and spur economic opportunity for disadvantaged communities that have been historically marginalized and overburdened by pollution and underinvestment in housing, transportation, water, and wastewater infrastructure, and healthcare. Environmental justice is defined by Bullard, who is largely regarded as the founder of this school of inquiry, as embracing the principle that all people and communities are entitled to equal protection of environmental and public health laws and regulations. With the President's executive order, EPA and all other agencies are required to examine the impact of pollution on disadvantaged communities, including the impact of mercury. Mercury has a particular impact on disadvantaged communities that rely upon fish in their diet, including indigenous communities. Okay? We can understand this by looking at its politics. Okay? We can look at its politics. If mercury is not an issue, if air pollution in itself is not an issue, and we saw actually in one of the last slides, we saw the decline in air pollution. That's actually a result of regulation. That's a result of law. It didn't happen naturally. It didn't happen because we decided not to regulate things. It happened because of law. Okay? It happened because regulations were put in place. And that's a good thing. I think we'd all agree it's a good thing that pollution went down. But it happened because some intervention was put into the system. We understand that if it's such a great thing, if pollution itself is so neutral and so non-factor, I ask my classes to think about think about something we call the Beverly Hills paradox. If you had 10 acres of land and you needed to put a toxic waste dump and there was 10 acres in Beverly Hills, would you put it there? Nobody. No. Okay, good. At least some people said no. But there are reasons, right? I mean, we all understand property values and stuff like that, but property values are not an independent variable. Property values are not independent, not just about the property itself, it's about who lives there, okay? So the fact that the pollution is disproportionately impacting upon low-income and minority communities is not a random act. We see this as well in property valuation. Okay, property valuation has become a recent issue. African Americans who live in single-family homes of similar conditions to whites find that when they get their property valuated by an assessor, it's about $200,000 less than white communities. However, if they remove African American cultural features from their home and have a white neighbor or friend show the house, the value goes back up. Okay, so it's not independent. It's not an independent variable about who lives where. So the solution to mercury regulations that should have been obvious is to win elections. Okay, if you don't like the way that mercury regulations are, you feel that mercury regulations are bad, it's not necessary to find new science, it's necessary to find new policy. Okay, and then to try and prove it in the political realm. Okay, it's necessary to kind of explain why this is not an issue that should be of concern to people when we see that actual intervention has resulted in the decline of pollution and lengthening of life. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. We have time now for a few questions from the audience for both of our speakers. Anybody has any questions? Yeah, Ben?
One problem with modern science is that it can't help being big. I mean, you can't build a particle accelerator in your garage. Do you guys see a way to, I don't know, continue doing science on these? I mean, science, I guess, some scientific endeavors require a lot of resources and a lot of collaboration. But this is especially a question for Dr. Sim, but I don't mind hearing your thoughts as well. How can those projects be done without being, I don't know, swallowed by politics?
Yeah, good question. I think sometimes we overspend. For example, give you an example of this is example of government bureaucracy. By the way, I do want to make that I think the best way to explain why this thing is going down. I hope we don't agree that it's all 100% due to what you call regulation and law. I think it's related to wealth, increased wealth, economic drivers, and then technological thing. You get sensible, basically, right? You don't want to breathe this dirty air, isn't it? Right, in that sense. But for the big science, I give an example of James Webb Telescope. The one that beautiful pictures. Original budget is $1 to $2 billion. Every time you get NASA and all these people involved, guess how much it's going to cost? 20 billion, right? 10 times more. I mean, big science, I agree in particle physics and all that, but there's also a limit, isn't it? Right? China is trying to do some very serious kilometers kind of accelerator, things like that. Yes. I don't mind. I love government. See, Eisenhower is right. Government should fund science. I'm not saying government shouldn't be funding science, but please don't have interest in it. Like EPA. Science Advisory Board is completely staged. I'm so sorry. The people that receive funding from EPA get on, and then two of my friends, Stan Young, he's on the Science Advisory Board of EPA when it was Trump administration. Then he got kicked out, and then he sued them now, right? It's ridiculous. I mean, can we just throw away all this policy and all these battles about equities and all that? I'm sorry. How do you call public health when it's just trying to talk about differential things? I understand all of that. I really understand, and I deeply sympathize with that whole point. But the problem is that for Mercury, let me state one more point very clearly. What do you get out of it? If you get rid of this 45 tons or 50 tons of the Mercury used, even though our coal now is used so much less with natural gas power, what will we get? Are you going to change the tuna Mercury level? Are you going to change the lake level that all these poor people angler? By the way, I estimated before the amount in which that those poor people, let's say they fish and then they eat, they almost have to eat that every day for 60, 70 years. I'm sorry, this is not amount to cause any problem. That's part of the problem. All this can be quantified. We went through all the numbers. I don't say this thing lightly. I really understand that some poor people have to eat those fish, but you have to eat so much until it's just not going to make it's not true. So it's not going to be dangerous in that sense. This is why I feel comfortable sit up here and say this sort of thing. Not because I want to be outrageous, outspoken, all this nonsense, you know. I really have went through the number in terms of Mercury issue. Because if you can not going to change all this, I like to ask the question, what for? Because you say you try to improve public health, isn't it? Is that the ultimate goal? Let's set a proper metric that we all can measure and agree upon. Maybe that's a more constructive way to do, right? I don't think I answered your question, but big science is big science. When I say when you get too big, you got to have at least a simple idea of blue team and red team, which is very famous in a lot of this kind of debate. But they get rid of it. We've been trying to propose during Trump administration blue team and green team on this climate change. They get rid of it, right? A lot of things they don't even want to have it because it's basically. I'm sorry, you think that I say a lot of outrageous things. All my thing is not peer reviewed. Everything has been done. How come no one wants to talk about this? I don't have to be the spokesperson. I don't want to be the spokesperson. I just brought you stuff that's shocking, actually. Why do EPA do this sort of experimentation on human beings when they say this PM 2.5 is so toxic? Really, I want to know the answer. Don't run around anywhere else and saying that, oh, we're not. No. Answer the question. And then we can go from there, isn't it? Don't do this sort of thing because it's not appropriate. Sorry, I say too much.
No, that's okay. We're just going to respectfully disagree on whether regulation was responsible for bringing down pollutants or affluence. Affluence is really usually associated with more use of natural resources and more emissions. Because of regulations, cars have not increased as exponentially as the number of cars have not increased their emissions as much. So there's regulation there. Second thing is, I think the issue about big science is really focusing on the big part. Really, I don't know that the size of science is necessarily at issue here. I mean, we're pretending this is a cartel. This is something that's a multinational that has got the secretive properties, and is always smaller than the largest corporation. Okay, that doesn't mean that corporations are bad. It just means that big science is not on the same plane as a corporation, a coal company, or an oil company. So let's remember that size is big. What we call big is very, very relative here.
I'm wondering if This question is for you, if there's any parts of the EPA that are like worth preserving or you think should be abolished, the entire agency, that's fine.
This is why I make the statement, if I may go for a second, sorry. It's basically reduce the size by 10. We keep all the existing law that has been written. We don't need any more of this nonsense, because what they do now, like I told you, the example is that from 90, they keep wanting to lower this standards. Making it more safe, quote unquote, but it's just a crazy thing to go from 15 micron per cubic meter to 12. And then ozone is a big fight now. I'm sorry, industry may be fighting this and that. Nothing to do with it, I don't really care. But my question is that if you lower this ozone standard from 70 to 50 ppb parts per billion, what does it do? Does it save more lives or make everybody more looking better or something? I don't know. I don't understand that. This is what I mean. Keep the existing law, make it much smaller, or else it's going to create a lot of problem in the sense that they always have to find problem, isn't it? Like this carbon dioxide thing. Look at that. Who's going to fund me? I used to have all the funding from everywhere. NSF, NASA, Air Force, everything. And then until you say something that is not convenient, it's all gone. Really gone. But I also personally, I don't blame all this agency. I personally make a decision that I do not want to take this money that is unaccountable, in the sense that all the taxpayers seem to have no voice on this. If you really believe in that sort of thing, I really do believe in election also. I think we should have open and transparent election, not mail-in ballot. Okay? No, stop.
There's a lot to preserve about EPA. We tried in the 1980s to cut it significantly. There was an effort to cut it, and we spent 10 years kind of haggling over whether there was acid rain, whether that was a problem or not. We finally resolved that under a Republican president in 1990. So we've tried this approach before. We got to the same result again.
Yeah, in a way.
Sorry, I must admit this. What specifically do you attribute the lowering of air pollution in the U.S. to not attributing it to regulation? Because it's an inverse graph in the U.S. that you're thinking about it. And the one you showed is lowering over time. So
well, it's a very natural thing if you look at the big picture in the sense. And by the way, I'm not an economist or whatsoever. All I understand is, speak from my own understanding, is that if you have all the wealth in the world, isn't it? Then you naturally, first of all, your garden will be a whole lot better, isn't it? You start taking care of it a lot more. You maybe use even less fertilizer because you know that ultimately the runoff from the fertilizer is going to cause problems. It's because you get more wealth, so you have that incentive that is very different from a law. Oh, yes, I didn't say that all of it, but I'm trying to say that it's not all due to the law in some sense, right? Clean Air Act, like I said, in the very beginning it worked. That's why you reduce all the small problems. But the solution to Clean Air Act was not really the law. It was because of the catalytic converter. Then you start putting this cheap $200-300 kind of equipment at the back of the car, and the problem is that it's very sad. They don't learn from this example. All this work, like Egypt, all those places, they don't even want to put in this stuff that we already have, that we already introduced such a technology in that sense. So I say that technology play a very big part to it, and it's also related to wealth. By the way, the principle is basically that you're more wealthy, you're more capable of taking care of your environment in that sense. You don't go pollute your water. You don't. First of all, the most important one is sewage, right? Remember, in the past, everybody dumped all the crap inside the ocean or river or whatever, right? This day, who would ever do it in the U.S.? You try to go to the third world, yeah, you see all of these things everywhere. By the way, that's the kind of problem that we have, right?
The catalytic converter was important, but it was mandated basically by the Clean Air Act. So.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a longer time in supporting the idea that the EPA is way off base on PM 2.5. 12 micrograms per cubic meter is very small, folks. It's an easy calculation. Over an 80-year lifetime, you inhale less than 1 teaspoonful of particles at 12 micrograms per cubic meter. January 2009, the state of California passed 2 laws, probably some others, but one was to regulate small particles on leaf blowers and lawnmowers. The other was to legalize recreational use of marijuana. Now, marijuana smoker gets somewhere between 10 and 100 billion small particles on a single joint, or a cigarette smoker. That is more small particles than you inhale an entire year of breathing California air. And when they have a big forest fire in about 3 days, it puts out more small particles than all of the vehicles in California. So we're at a point where we've lost perspective. We're trying to get down to very, very low levels, and the background levels of these pollutants are higher. And it's time for the EPA to get off this premature death idea. It just isn't happening. Oh, by the way, EPIC, I don't know if there's anybody here from EPIC. Energy Policy Institute, Chicago. I follow their stuff, and they write all kinds of articles on small particles across the world. I've never seen one article from them on recreational use of marijuana or cigarettes, which is a much worse problem with small particles.
No comment, but repeat. Over 80 years lifetime, over 80 years lifetime, you might as well take a scoop of this PM 2.5 invisible and then you swallow it. Do it now, right? Over 80 years, that's how little 12 micrograms per cubic meter. This is where the number, by the way, I don't joke around like Greta Thunberg was worried about this thing. They really worry. No, I sympathize. But the problem is that it's just very strange, you know, it really caused some psychological problem. It's very sad. Don't do that. Try to at least make sense with the number, because this white chart is very, be careful. You know, like even until now, they won't admit that this curve, this temperature warming that they show is so standard, because they're pounding chest every day. I'm not trying to show that I'm strong. I'm trying to tell you that, please, all I want you to tell it, can you look at this and look at this? Talk about it. And then you cannot possibly make a regulation or rules or whatever, right? Trying to say that, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. For what? I want to know how you lower the temperature, please. Right? I have argued with Al Gore, Secretary of Energy, Steve Chu. I've done quite a few of these things, even though I have no title or whatsoever. But I'm a scientist. I cannot sit idly by and know all these numbers, which I do know them, and I can work out any numbers that and then I want to understand. That's how I'm asking questions. And then one good thing that I want students and this, by the way, I don't want to say that no law, no rules and all that, so you'll be out of job, right? It's not like that. It's really about do the right thing. There's something that's too excessive, like Steve Gorham just said, right? Especially on PM 2.5, it's too extreme now. You're talking about things that doesn't make sense at all. I mean, why do you want to do this? For what actually? I want to know what to achieve. Even mercury I cannot accept, because I want to see that you lower the mercury, okay? I'll give you an example. So this is something to, in science you have to have something that you can say, then you will accept the notion. That you reduce this carbon dioxide, all under this mercury, from power plant, everything. Do it all.
Well, Dr. Su and Dr. Lodato,
and tell you what you get, right?
Thank you very, very much for joining us.